Good afternoon, good evening, good morning. Thanks again for tuning us in. This is B&B Hockey Talk, where we don't talk soccer, figure skating, or ping pong. We're only hockey, and we want to thank you guys again for tuning us in, whether you're watching us on YouTube on our B&B Hockey Talk channel or tuning us in from our Facebook page. Thanks again for listening to us. I'm Aaron Bloxall with my co-host, Mr. Matthew Balzer. Not to be confused with Matt Barzell, who we talked about yesterday. A couple of signings in Ottawa today. We're going to touch on that, and then we're going to touch on our 31 teams in 31 days with Let's Go Rangers. Let's go, Matt. Let's talk about what's going on in Ottawa, and then lead us into the New York Rangers.
All right, so the salary arbitrator was pretty busy today, awarding Mark Stone a one-year, $7.35 million contract extension with the Ottawa Senators, and defenseman Cody Ceci was awarded a one-year, $4.3 million contract. Both of these are on the higher end. Like, I think Stone was asking for $9 million, and Ceci was asking, I think, somewhere between $5 and $6 million. So the contracts are pretty nice with Mark Stone. Next year, that means he'll be an unrestricted free agent. So they're big three guys that they're trying to build around with everybody gone, with Carlson, Stone, and Matt Duchene. All are unrestricted free agents at the end of next season. And with Carlson most likely still to be traded, even though that's really quieted down now. The rebuild will be in full effect here in Ottawa, and it could get even worse than what it was last year.
Well, I think Ottawa just needs to blow it up and start all over again, start getting assets, get what they can for Carlson. Biggest issue with that, though, is they don't have a first-round draft pick for next year. And judging by the way their team's looking, it might be Jack Hughes. And Colorado, of course, owns that pick. What a disaster is happening in Ottawa, and wow, I would just be like so hurt right now if I was an Ottawa Senator fan. You know, the fans don't know which direction they're going. So, I think they got some okay value. I think they overpaid Mark Stone a little bit, but you know that one-year contract is really gonna hopefully doesn't come back to bite them in the butt for sure. So let's get into the New York Rangers. 31 teams in 31 days. We had a lot of fun doing this one, folks, because just so you know, there are a ton of New York Ranger prospects. The open letter to the fans that they did last year, letting them know what direction they were going. They were able to accumulate a lot of assets really quickly. And we are going to not touch on all the prospects because there is just so many of them. In fact, both Matt and I came up with over 20 prospects each that could possibly play this year for the New York Rangers. A lot of young guys, a lot of signings out of the Swedish League, the Finnish League, the KHL. They're really looking for this rebuild. I don't think they're going to be quite a contender yet, but, man, this team's going in the right direction. Why don't you start us off with the forwards, Matt? Who do you got? Who do you like? What kind of line combinations do you see? Let's get into it.
All right. So the top line I have is Chris Kreider, Mika Zibanejad, and Matt Zuccarello. Zibanejad's busy DJing this off season. I think he actually dropped like a song that actually wasn't half bad. But Zibanejad and Zuccarello are the big names here. Zuccarello, we'll see if he lasts the season, as he's an unrestricted free agent at the end of the year. But the tiny Norwegian winger really gets it done. He led the team in points with 53 points in 80 games. Zibanejad, I'm hoping he can get that next step. He only had 27 goals and 47 points last year, but I think he can be a 60-plus point centerman, and hopefully he can take that next step. And Chris Kreider, the big power forward, I think he had like a blood clot or something that held him out for a while before he was able to come back towards the end of the year. But he's back to full health and should should get around like 25 to 50, 25 goals to 50 points this coming year. The second line I have is Kevin Hayes, Vladislav Nemestikov, and Pavel Buchnevich. Nemestikov was part of that big trade for Ryan McDonough between the Tampa Bay Lightning. Nemestikov, I think his production wasn't as good because he was playing when he got traded to the Rangers, because he was playing with Kucherov and Stamkos on that top line, and he was a great fit on that top line. But it looks like he'll be moving back to the center ice position this coming year. And Hayes is another huge power forward. I think he's like 6'6" or something like that. But he had 25 goals last year, and he just got that recent contract that we talked about earlier this week. And the most intriguing name, when I think he can be a superstar this year, Pavel Buchnevich, young Russian forward. He had 43 points in 74 games last year. But this guy has superstar potential written all over him. I think we could see a point jump all the way up to 60 points and around 25 to 30 goals this year if he can find some right chemistry with his line mates. The third line I have as Jimmy Vesey, Ryan Spooner, and Jesper Fast. Spooner, another guy that just got a recent contract, played really well with the Rangers as soon as he came over with 16 points in 20 games with the Rangers, and could potentially move up in the lineup with that offensive ability that he has. Jimmy Vesey was that big college free agent signing from a couple years ago. Still hasn't really panned out like offensively, I think, as much as the Rangers would like. He only had 17 goals and 28 points last year. So we'll see if he can get a bit of a point jump this year. But so far he's just sort of settled around like that 30-point mark. And the fourth line, right now I'll just list off the veterans because we'll talk about in the prospects. They have a lot of young guys that I do believe will be in the lineup. But I can see between Matt Bolesky, Peter Holland, Boo Neves, and Cody McLeod are the four veteran guys that I think will get the first looks on that fourth line to bring in some grit. But Matt Bolesky could be buried down in the minors as they got him in the Rick Nash trade. And he was buried down in the minors just because his production just fell off the map in the NHL.
Yeah, I can definitely see Peter Holland and Matt Bolesky getting buried in the minors. Boo Neves, one of the fan favorites towards the end of the year. Another power forward. They got a lot of power forwards on this team. Chris Kreider, Kevin Hayes. But Boo Neves, I mean, the crowd towards the end of the season, they were chanting boo because of his power forward play and the way he actually looked like a young Rick Nash towards the end of the year, and he became a fan favorite. But like you said, there's a lot of players that are prospects on this team. Some of them played some games towards the end of the season last year, and I believe there's going to be at least 3, if not 4 of them starting in the opening night roster on this Ford bunch. Let's get into their defense, and again, there's a couple of prospects or young players that are on this back end. But we're going to start with Brady Ski, who I guess is a young player, right? And then their big free agent signing from a couple of years ago, Kevin Shattenkirk. Those two guys are going to lead a lot of the offense from the back end. Ski, I think, turned really good into a power play quarterback and definitely helped lead the charge offensively. Shattenkirk just needs to stay healthy this year and get his career back on track. I think that would definitely help him out because that injury last year really sidetracked him. Mark Stahl, another guy that's so dependable defensively. He's starting to slow down. His body's pretty banged up. I don't see him there that much longer. But a couple of young guys we will touch on that are both I don't know if they're considered rookies this year. I don't think so because they played enough games last year. But John Gilmore, he's 25 years old, played 28 games last year for the Rangers, had 44 games with the Hartford Wolfpack down in the AHL. Was almost actually just over a point a game down in the minors. Only 5 points with the big club, but they really like this guy. He was drafted several years ago. And another guy that they're really big on is Neil Pionk. Say that 10 times fast. Pionk. He finished the season off very strong and was one of their most reliable defensemen. And he's definitely going to be – I think Pionk's actually going to be in their top 4 this year. And then we're going to talk about some of their depth defensemen. Young guy, Anthony D'Angelo, who they brought in from the Arizona Coyotes. He's going to see some regular playing time for sure. A couple of veterans that we think are going to get buried in the minors again. Brendan Smith was already sent down there last year with he's well over a $4 million a year contract. They got him out of Detroit a few years back, but played most of the year down in the minors. Steve Camphor, another one that was injured most of last year. I don't know if he's going to be just a depth defenseman this year or if he'll get a shot at playing. And free agent signing out of Ottawa, Frederick Clausen, and another guy they got in the Rick Nash trade from Boston, Rob O'Gara, who actually finished off strong down the stretch again. So that's 10 NHL contracts. Obviously, they're only going to keep 7 or 8. What do you like on their back end? What do you see from them other than the incredible youth?
I know, yeah. So there'll be a lot of competition for spots on their back end. But yeah, Neil Pionk is the guy that I'm really intrigued with, because I actually picked him up on my fantasy team towards the end of the year just because he was bringing in points. He ended up getting 14 points in 28 games in the NHL, which was actually really good because I think in the minors he only had 17 points in 48 games. So basically same point range and far less games. But I think he'll have a chance to run the power. Well, actually, it might not get as much power play time with Shattenkirk coming back this year, because that was huge. Once when he went down for the season, their power play wasn't as good. Trying to get that quarter play, that good quarterback defenseman on the back end. But yeah, Mark Stahl might be a name that gets traded, though he only had 8 points in 72 games last year, and with that hefty contract, sort of along with Brendan Smith, who they'll most likely bury, as you said, could be a guy on the way out to make room for these young guys on the back end.
Obviously, they moved a lot of veterans out of the Ranger lineup last year, including fan favorite Ryan McDonough, as well. I'm misplacing his name. Who they sent to Tampa as well. Who was the other guy? Dan Girardi. They moved Dan Girardi as well, and they just they moved Rick Nash. They moved several players, picking up lots of assets, picking up lots of draft picks that are turning into assets. This roster is young. They have a ton of youth that are under the age of 20 that are getting close to making the jump or at least competing for that. And, of course, in goal, why don't you take us through the goalies?
Yeah, King Henrik. Henrik Lundqvist is back in net. He's getting up there in age now, I think around 35 years old, but he still has 3 years left on his contract. He really struggled to start the year at the beginning of the year, so his numbers weren't that great. His goals against average was just below 3, but his save percentage was still decent at .915, and his record was at .500, 26, 26, and 7 in 62 games. But he said he's all in for the rebuild. Because the Rangers had asked him if he wanted to stick around for the rebuild or if he would like a trade to somewhere to win the Stanley Cup. But the Rangers is his home. That's where he's been from the beginning of this year. He's been one of the most consistent goalies from the first year that he played in the NHL till now. He's one of the most consistent goalies. He's been Sweden's backbone internationally. And should see another majority of the starts. Their backup role will be a flip of the coin to see who will get it. Alexander Georgiev, who they brought up towards the end of last year and actually played quite well. Went 4-4-1 and had a .918 save percentage, and is a good young goalie prospect that right now I see as a favorite as a backup. And then their other goalie, Marek Mazanik, who was with the Nashville Predators organization, and then he went to the KHL for a couple of years, and then towards the end of last year, they brought him in more as a veteran presence in the American League. But he's still young enough and has enough potential that he could push for that backup role.
Well, as a young team, what better way to have solid goaltending behind you knowing that you've got an all-star keeper that, has the superstar power that King Henrik does. As a defenseman, I would, if I was a young defenseman, that would be the best way to break into the NHL. As I'm developing, is to have somebody like that. So I'm not afraid to make mistakes, and I think that will really help this youthful team. So let's touch on some of their prospects. I'm going to get into a handful of them. I'm going to touch on 3 right away that I think are going to be in the opening night roster. Of course, the first one, he's well known for throwing his silver medal into the crowd at the World Junior Championships after they lost the gold medal game. Elias Anderson from Sweden, he played in Frölunda last year, came over to the AHL for the Hartford Wolfpack, played in 25 games, had 14 points, finished out the season with the big club in New York, playing 7 games, had a couple of points. I remember seeing on the highlights his family all joyful when he got his first goal. And, of course, at the World Junior Championships, he had 7 points in 7 games. Now, he is a guy that I believe is going to be in this opening night roster, as well as prospect Brett Howden that they got in the from the Tampa Bay Lightning organization. Last year, he played his junior hockey out of Moose Jaw, 49 games, 75 points, a bit of a power forward again. And they've got a lot of big players. And, of course, playing for Canada at the World Juniors, he had 7 points in 7 games as well. And then the other forward that I believe is going to make the opening night roster is Czech forward Philip Chytil, who played in Hartford last year for the most part, 46 games, 31 points. When he did get called up to the NHL, he played in 9 games, was able to get 3 points. And in the World Juniors for the Czech Republic, he had 7 games and 4 points. So all 3 guys, a lot of offensive potential for those 3. It'll be interesting to see. I think they're going to make the roster, and they'll probably put all 3 of them together so they can push some of the older guys. But they're all very skilled players and very close to developing. So let's talk about a couple other prospects. I'm going to hand it over to you after, and you're going to talk about some of your favorites that you see on this list, because we have just an absolute plentiful list to choose from. I'm going to talk about local boy that's been playing in Langley for the Vancouver Giants. None other than Vancouver Canuck favorite player Cliff Roning's son, Ty Roning, who for Vancouver Giants last year played 70 games, had 84 points, just absolutely lit up the league, and did that the year before as well. Played 3 games for the Hartford Wolfpack at the end of the season. Wasn't able to record a point, but I know last year he was almost a point a game when he got called up. He's got enough experience now. I actually expect to see him playing in Hartford this year. Maybe get some call-up to the big club, but he's going to be pushing for one of those offensive spots because he is like his dad. He's small, but just very dynamic, very quick, very skilled forward. The last person I'll talk about before passing over to you is defenseman Ryan Lindgren, who they got from the Boston Bruins in the Rick Nash trade. Played in the NCAA last year for the University of Minnesota. 35 games, only 9 points. But when he got called up to and signed the contract with the big club, he played in Hartford. He played 10 games and had 4 points. As a defenseman, they were looking at him as a very solid guy. They got a lot of defensemen on this team that could push for one of those top 6 spots. So what do you see? What do you like? And I know there's a lot more prospects to go around here. We're not going to touch on any of their draft picks from 2018. So just over a month ago, the ones that they got, I'll name some of them at the end because they did get 3 first-rounders this year. But what do you got outside of that? Because I know there's a lot more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I'll touch on Elias Anderson just first. I think this guy will be a Calder candidate. I think this year he was playing alongside Elias Pettersson at the World Juniors, and he could potentially be moving into a top 6 spot as the season goes along. Just some prospects that I have: Vinny Lettieri, who had 23 goals and 36 points in only 55 games in the American League this past year. Got into a handful of games with the big club, 19 games, and had 5 points. He's another guy that will be pushing for a spot in that bottom 6. Another defenseman in the third rounder in 2016, defenseman Sean Day. He had 47 points in only 50 games, split between Windsor and Kingston in the OHL. In his draft year, and I remember when he was younger, he was granted exceptional status to play in the OHL, which means guys like Aaron Ekblad and John Tavares, who are already mature enough and ready to play in the OHL, they're granted like when there's like 15 years old or something like that to play in the league. And this guy is huge. I think he's like over like 6'3" or something like that. So he's an intriguing prospect. Another defenseman, Liber Hayek, who they got over along with Brett Howden from Tampa Bay, and is another defenseman who starred with Regina last year. He had 39 points in 58 games, and he was one of the standouts for Slovakia at the World Juniors. Bigger defenseman, but he was one of their strong points in the tournament for them. Another guy that I have as a goalie prospect, Adam Huska, who only went 8-16-2 for Connecticut in the NCAA, but he had a 9.12 save percentage. Is another young goalie prospect that is coming up in the season. And you'll name their 3 first rounders. I think we would touch on them, but I haven't seen enough from them. I'm guessing at the World Juniors we'll be able to get more of a read on them, but I just haven't seen enough of them. And just to touch on Ty Ronning, just a crazy, like 61 goals in 70 games anywhere in any league is just unbelievable. So I'm hoping all the best to him, and I'm hoping he gets a shot sooner rather than later in the NHL.
Yeah, and there's just so many prospects. We could keep going. A couple of guys I still want to touch on is a defenseman, Chris Biggrass, that is potentially going to play for the Rangers this year. They got him out of Colorado. I can't even remember who they traded because they traded so many players, but he's a guy that was highly touted as one of the stars of the future on the back end of that Colorado defense, and he's going to be pushing for one of those starting positions at training camp. And goaltender Igor Shesterkin, who's played in the KHL for CSKA, I believe, last year. Huge. In 28 games, he had a 1.7 goals against average and a 9.33 save percentage. They've got him touted as a big prospect that potentially replace King Henrik down the road. But they do have a lot of other goalie prospects. This is a team loaded with prospects. And like we mentioned, they had 3 first-round draft picks this year, the 9th, the 22nd, and the 28th overall picks. They took Vitaly Kravtsov, and then big defenseman Keandre Miller, and then Nils Lundqvist. So they're all over the map. They got guys from the Czech League. They got guys from the Liga out of Finland, guys from the Svenskeren and the SHL out of Sweden. They got guys in the KHL. They got guys out of the WHL and the OHL. These guys are loaded with prospects. It's going to be, I think in a couple of years, this Ranger team is going to be something to deal with. And I think Lundqvist was smart to stick around to see what's going to happen with them.
Yeah, and it is nice for being a Rangers fan, knowing that it's just like when the team decided to rebuild, they did it like that. There was no wait around, and just one trade deadline, basically. They reloaded their team and everything. And then as a Canucks fan, it's like you've seen them struggling over the years. And we do have some guys coming up, but it's just tough to watch where it's just in one off season, basically, they've already set their future for their team just like that.
Yeah, and I mean, we never even touched on, like, Nemesnikov came over from Tampa Bay. These are guys that are young, that are, they got not only actual players that were already playing in the league, but they got loads of draft picks and prospects with everybody that they traded away. So 77 points last year, last in that crazy Metropolitan Division. Where do you see them finishing this year?
Yeah, I see them finishing 11th. I think they'll sort of be figuring around the 500 range. for the season. Having Lundqvist in that, he'll steal some games for them this year. But I see them around like the 82-point mark, sort of around the 500.
Yeah, we're on the same page. I see them around the 80-point mark. I don't think they're going to increase a whole lot, but through this learning curve, I mean, I would not like, I wouldn't want to play this team in 2-3 years, because once some of these guys develop, I mean, they have 4 or 5 of these prospects we've just mentioned, not even the ones that are already on the roster that are still young, are potential superstars in this league. And this Rangers team could be absolutely stacked in 2-3 years. And it's going to be really interesting to see what they do and how, like you said, the snap of the finger, they rebuilt. They reloaded the entire prospect system, the draft picks that they got. They've stocked the shelves. They even took on contract with guys like Matt Bolesky, and they got space, so they might as well. So we're in agreement. Rangers, guys, watch out for them in a couple of years. Not next year. Next year they're going to still struggle because they're in the toughest division in all of hockey. But we're going to end the episode there, guys. Thank you so much again for watching. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, B&B Hockey Talk. Like our Facebook post, and share your comments about the New York Rangers or about the signings in Ottawa today. And, of course, great timing, because our next episode, Monday, a holiday here in Canada next week, so we'll be back Tuesday with our next episode of 31 Teams in 31 Days. The Ottawa Senators. Surprise, surprise. We get to talk about the disaster that is, the disaster that was, and the disaster that will be in Canada's capital. So thanks again, guys, for watching. We always have so much fun bringing this to you. Make sure you tell your friends about us. Get them to like our page. Give us a shout. The more you comment, the more we'll shout out to you guys watching. So thanks again. We'll see you guys next Tuesday. Have a fantastic weekend, and play some hockey.